My name is Eveline Kerrigan, 35 years old. I am the kind of woman who believes in doing the right thing even when no one is watching. That habit has cost me sleep, friendships, and, apparently, this job. Mark Calloway, my boss, sat behind his mahogany desk, his voice measured, almost rehearsed. After a conversation with your coworker this morning, he said, pausing to savor the moment, "We can't keep you here anymore." The words fell with the precision of a verdict. I stood still, my palms cold but steady. 5 years of work, late nights, and quiet loyalty condensed into a single sentence. I smiled not out of politeness, but because I had already accepted this ending. I reached into my bag and placed a cream-colored envelope on his desk. "I know," I said softly. Mark leaned back, eyebrows raised, trying to read me. "Is this supposed to be your resignation?" His tone carried amusement, the kind men use when they think they've already won. He tore the envelope open, chuckling. "You made this easy for both of us." Eve. But as his eyes moved down the page, the amusement drained away. His fingers stopped mid-turn. The silence in the room changed texture, thick, electric. He read the final line once, then again. Copies of all evidence have been submitted to Human Resources, the legal department, and the ethics board. The color left his face. He looked up, his voice no longer steady. "You went to the board." I met his gaze. I went where the truth belongs. For a moment, neither of us moved. The ticking of the office clock filled the space between us. Then I gathered my coat from the chair, nodded once, and walked out before he could find the right threat to hide behind. In the hallway, my breath came slow and clear. I didn't feel triumphant, only certain. By the time the elevator doors closed, Mark Calloway was already dialing someone in a hurry. 3 weeks earlier, I had made the mistake that led us here. I believed someone everyone else refused to hear. 3 weeks earlier, the office buzzed with the usual noise phones, chatter, the faint hum of ambition. I remember seeing Nora Santos standing by the break room window, holding a folder too tightly. Her eyes red. "Are you okay?" I asked. She blinked fast, as if trying to keep herself from unraveling. "You know the wellness campaign I pitched last month, the one with the neighborhood clinics?" I nodded. It had been fresh, smart, and distinctly hers. "They're running it," she said, voice cracking. "Same concept, same copy lines. Only now it's called Mark's idea." I hesitated. Around here, ideas changed hands quietly, without credit or apology. But Nora wasn't the type to invent stories. She showed me her draft's timestamps, email chains, everything. "Have you told him I asked?" She gave a bitter laugh. "I did. He said I should be flattered. The department was inspired." I stared at the printouts. They were identical to the campaign rolling out next week. "You should take this to HR." "I already did," she said. "They told me to let it go for the good of the team." Her hands trembled. "Eve, I know this could make things worse, but would you help me file a formal complaint?" The question hung in the air. Around us, the office moved on, coffee poured, keyboards clicked, people pretending not to see. I thought of all the times I'd watched someone stay silent to keep their job. I didn't want to be another name on that list. "I'll help," I said. We spent nights after hours collecting evidence metadata, draft versions, even Nora's early sketches. She was careful, desperate, scared. When she filed the complaint, the reply came faster than expected. "Case closed, no violation found." The next morning, her desk was empty, her badge left on the keyboard. The message in the group chat said she'd resigned for personal reasons. Everyone accepted it. Everyone except me. Because the night before, I had seen the message Mark sent to HR handle this quietly. "She's not worth the trouble." By the following week, Nora's name was no longer spoken aloud. People just said what happened and glanced toward her empty desk. I started noticing the change before I could name it. A meeting I'd helped schedule suddenly moved to a different time without my invite. The project board where my notes used to hang was wiped clean. When I asked Daniel, my supervisor, he smiled too easily, just simplifying communication. Eve, fewer cooks in the kitchen. That afternoon, I overheard two analysts whispering near the printer. She's the one who backed Nora, right one said. Yeah, HR's watching her now. Heard she encouraged the whole complaint thing. They looked up and saw me. The silence after was sharper than the gossip. I kept my head down, but my inbox told the story for me. Every email from Daniel now included a new recipient, Leah from HR, copied quietly at the end. When I stepped into his office, he didn't even look up from his screen. Is there a problem, I asked? He sighed as if I'd already taken too much of his time. Eve, this isn't personal. But after Nora's situation, upper management wants oversight, just procedure. Procedure for what? For clarity, he said, finally meeting my eyes. You've been outspoken lately. It makes people uneasy. Uneasy. The word landed like a bruise. Later that week, I was called in for a development conversation. Leah waited in the conference room with a clipboard. This is just a feedback cycle, she said sweetly, sliding me a printed sheet. I read the anonymous evaluation halfway before the letters blurred. Disruptive to team unity. Displays misplaced loyalty. Leah's smile didn't falter. We're here to help you realign. I folded the paper carefully, placed it back on the table, and stood. Thank you, I said, because anger would have been too easy. As I walked back through the hallway, I could feel eyes on my back, curious, cautious, already convinced. Someone had turned my belief in the truth into proof of disloyalty. That morning, I arrived early, hoping the quiet would steady me. Through the half-open conference room door, I heard voices low, deliberate. Mark's tone was unmistakable. Nora Santos. Disloyalty issue. Kerrigan encouraged it. A pause, then Leah's voice. If we act now, we minimize exposure. The words hit like static under my skin. I stepped back before they saw me, forcing my face blank, my breath even. By 10 o'clock, my name appeared in Mark's calendar, Meeting E. Kerrigan. No subject line. When I walked in, he didn't offer a seat. His office smelled of coffee and confidence. Close the door, he said. I did. He folded his hands. After a conversation with your coworker this morning, we've decided we can't keep you here anymore. My coworker. My voice barely sounded like mine. Nora, he said flatly. She admitted you were involved in her complaint. You encouraged her. That's a breach of trust. I held his stare. Nora doesn't lie. He smiled thinly. Everyone lies when they're desperate. So this is about loyalty. I said, it's about alignment, he corrected. You're talented, Eve, but you've made yourself hard to manage, and I can't have an employee who questions leadership. I wanted to argue, to show him the proof Nora and I had collected. But something inside me stopped. He wasn't listening. He never had. Instead, I asked quietly, will you put that reason in writing? His expression flickered. Let's not make this difficult. I'm not. I said, I just want it documented. He looked irritated, already reaching for his phone. Already done with me. HR will coordinate your exit. You'll receive your final check next week. I nodded, turned, and opened the door. In the hallway, I could still hear his voice behind me, light, casual, moving on to the next call. The anger didn't come right away. It arrived later, quiet and steady, reshaping itself into something sharper, not revenge, not fear, resolve. That afternoon, I called the only person I trusted outside the company, Allison Green, an employment lawyer I'd met years ago during a compliance seminar. She answered on the second ring. Eveline Kerrigan, she said, her tone equal parts surprise and concern. You sound like someone who just realized the ground isn't as solid as it looked. I was let go this morning. I said, no written reason, just words about loyalty. I heard her chair creak. Tell me everything. An hour later, I sat in her office, a small space stacked with folders and casebooks. I handed her my contract. She skimmed it quickly, tapping a finger on one paragraph. Here, she said. The whistleblower clause. If you reported or supported a report about unethical conduct, the company can't retaliate without risk. Did you put anything in writing emails to HR, copies of Nora's drafts, internal messages? I still have them. Then you have leverage, she said simply. Keep it quiet for now. Gather everything emails, calendar invites, project versions, anything that shows a pattern. The less noise, the more power. I nodded, feeling something stir that I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. That night, the office was nearly empty when I logged in with my badge for the last time. Daniel's voicemail light blinked red, HR doors locked behind frosted glass. I opened my inbox and began forwarding copies of old threads to a private drive. Nora's original proposal timestamped 3 weeks before Mark's presentation. Meeting notes with my name erased from the credits. The message to HR that read, handle this quietly. She's not worth the trouble. Every click felt deliberate, steady. When a coworker passed my desk, I smiled. Just catching up on reports, I said. She nodded, unaware that my reports were the record of how easily good people could be erased. By midnight, I had the outline of something stronger than revenge proof. I shut down the computer, slipped my drive into my coat pocket, and stepped into the cold Boston air. 2 weeks later, I stopped waiting for fairness to find me. I wrote my own ending. The resignation letter came first, short, polite, every word measured. Thank you for the opportunity. I've learned from my time here. I wish the company continued success. Nothing that could be twisted or softened by someone else's version of events. Then I wrote the second document. It was longer, sharper. I listed what Nora and I had uncovered, her original drafts, the campaign pitch deck with her metadata, the emails showing how the concept was lifted and renamed. Each point had a date, a file path, a signature. No anger, no adjectives, just evidence. The final line read, copies of all evidence have been submitted to Human Resources, the Legal Department, and the Ethics Board. When I finished, I read it twice, then printed both pages on heavy ivory paper, the kind that made every word feel irreversible. I slipped them into a cream envelope, pressed one strip of tape along the flap, and placed it inside my bag. The next morning, the office lights hummed above my desk as if nothing had changed. Daniel passed by, giving his usual half-smile. Still here for a little longer, I said. He laughed softly, already forgetting me. At 9:30, I walked to the copier room to make one final scan. The machine hummed as it captured every page, one after another. I watched the red light glide across the paper like a quiet witness. When I returned to my desk, I tucked the copies into my coat pocket and sat back, breathing evenly. Around me, keyboards clicked, phones rang, people planned the next campaign. They had no idea how much of the old order was about to shift. By the time I reached for my coffee, my hand was steady again. The envelope rested beside it, pale and perfect. Tomorrow, it would cross Mark Calloway's desk, and for the first time in weeks, I felt calm. When I walked into Mark's office that morning, he was already smiling too wide, too sure of himself. "Eve," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "I was wondering when you'd come by. Ready to move on?" "Yes," I said, placing the envelope on his desk. "This is my official resignation." He glanced at it and chuckled. "Well, that saves us paperwork." He tore the flap open, scanning the first lines. Polite, professional. "I appreciate that." His tone softened into mock sympathy. "I'm sorry it had to end this way. You're talented, but sometimes people dig holes they can't climb out of." I stayed quiet. His fingers turned another page and stopped. The silence changed. His eyes narrowed as he flipped faster, reading the attached report. What is this? His voice cracked slightly. Documentation, I said evenly. Documentation of what everything Nora and I discovered. Each file has a timestamp and author record. You'll find your name in several of them. He swallowed hard. You went to the board, I went where the truth belongs. He stood abruptly, hands flat on the desk. Do you have any idea what this could do to your reputation? The industry is small. Eve, I can make one call. I met his eyes. You can make 100. The timestamps won't change. He stared at me for a long time, searching for a weakness that wasn't there. Then he sank slowly back into his chair, color fading from his face. I suppose you think this makes you righteous? He muttered. No, I said. It just makes things accurate. I turned toward the door. Behind me, I heard paper rustling, the faint clatter of his phone as he reached for it with shaking fingers. I didn't look back. The sound that filled the hallway as I walked away wasn't shouting, it was silence, deep and clean. The first morning after I left Horizon felt quiet in the wrong way. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at my laptop screen. No calendar alerts, no unread messages, no purpose. At first, I told myself it was rest. I answered a few job postings, wrote careful cover letters, waited. A week passed, then 2. The replies never came. When I called a former colleague, her tone was polite but distant. You know how it is, Eve, she said softly. People just don't want to get involved right now. I thanked her anyway and hung up before she heard how hard it was for me to swallow. Nora called from a new number one evening. Her voice carried both relief and exhaustion. I'm working part-time at a non-profit, she said. Nothing fancy. But I can breathe again. I'm glad. I told her. She hesitated. You still believe it was worth it? I wanted to say yes without thinking. Instead, I said, I think truth costs what it costs. We sat in silence for a moment before she added quietly, whatever happens, I'm grateful you didn't let them bury me. Then the line went dead, and the house felt too large again. Days blurred together. I walked along the harbor, applied to smaller firms, watched my savings shrink like tidewater pulling back from shore. There were moments when I wondered if Mark had been right, if I'd made myself unhireable by telling the truth. That night, as rain tapped the window, my laptop chimed. A new email. Subject investigation opened message. Thank you for your integrity. The board has initiated a full ethics review. You will be contacted if testimony is required. Signed, Horizon Media Board of Directors. I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. The house was still, but something inside me began to breathe again. 3 weeks after the email from the board, my phone rang while I was sorting through a pile of unanswered job applications. The caller ID read Horizon Media. I almost didn't answer. A woman's voice, calm, formal, came through. Ms. Kerrigan, this is Margaret Fulton, Chief Executive Officer. I would like to speak with you about recent developments at the company. I sat down slowly. I'm listening. There has been an internal review, she said. The board found evidence supporting the claims you submitted. Mr. Calloway has been suspended pending further investigation, and our Human Resources Director has resigned. Ms. Santos's original complaint has been officially reinstated and validated. I let her words settle. For the first time in months, I felt something like quiet justice. Margaret continued, We owe you an apology. I want to personally offer you reinstatement at Horizon with a promotion to Senior Communications Director. We will also be issuing a public acknowledgement of the events. Her tone was careful, more negotiation than contrition. I appreciate that, I said. You don't have to decide immediately, she added. We would truly value your return. I took a breath. No, thank you. The line went silent. Then, may I ask why I spent years working there, believing I had to earn my voice? I said, I'm done asking permission to use it. A pause, then a quiet sigh. I understand. For what it's worth, you did the right thing. When the call ended, I stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my laptop. Allison had told me the week before that she was leaving her firm to start a consultancy focused on workplace ethics and that she wanted a partner. That night, we met at a small cafe by the river. "You really turned them upside down," she said. "I just showed them what was already there." I replied. Allison smiled. "So, are we building something new?" I nodded. "Something honest." 6 months later, I sat in a co-working space overlooking Boston Harbor, the hum of new beginnings surrounding me. Our firm, Green & Kerrigan Consulting, was small but alive, built from the fragments of what had nearly broken us. Across the table, a young intern named Maya watched me organize files for a new client. She hesitated before speaking. "Eve, can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said. "What made you start this, I mean? Leaving a big company like Horizon?" Walking away from all of that, I smiled, a conversation I refused to ignore. She frowned slightly, curious. "With who? With someone everyone else stopped believing in," I said, "and with myself." Maya nodded slowly, as if filing the words away for later. The phone buzzed with a message from Allison client meeting at 2. "Don't forget the board documents." I typed back a quick reply, then reached for a plain white envelope already stamped and addressed. Inside was a single-page letter. "Dear Nora, the company made the right call, but the truth is, the fight changed me more than it changed them. I learned that integrity isn't quiet or loud, it's steady. I hope you're breathing easier now, and that your ideas have found a place that deserves them. With gratitude, Eve." I sealed the envelope and dropped it into the outgoing mail bin by the door. When I turned back, Maya was reviewing a draft policy on her screen. "You really believe people can change how companies work?" she asked. "I believe people can choose how they work," I said. "That's where it starts." Outside, the harbor gleamed in the winter light. I thought of the years I'd spent waiting for permission to be heard, and how simple it felt now to speak without asking. Sometimes, the hardest thing isn't believing someone else. It's believing yourself. And for the first time in a long while, I knew exactly what I believed. If standing by the truth cost you everything, would you still do it again? The call that ended my career came at exactly 12 o'clock midnight, right when the robotics timing slipped again and the entire 6-state grid hung on my next instruction. I had one hand on the manual override and the other gripping my headset when my phone lit up with the name I least wanted to see, Benton Hargreaves. The same Benton who once spilled an entire cup of coffee down my sleeve in the elevator and walked out without a glance. The same Benton who called me overly involved the first week he arrived, as if knowing how to prevent a meltdown was a personality flaw. I answered anyway. "Hadley," he said. Voice clipped, rehearsed. "Effective immediately. Your oversight is no longer required. The new protocols can handle everything now." Behind me, the techs were waiting for the next step. The actuator thudded out of rhythm, an unmistakable sign that Cheyenne's curing sequence would be thrown off within minutes. Benton did not ask about that. He did not even ask where I was. "This is your idea of timing," I asked quietly. He exhaled, annoyed that I spoke at all. "I am informing you of a transition. Your role is no longer aligned with future operations." I held the phone a little away from my ear. After 11 years holding together a system that was never supposed to function this smoothly, he was reading a message someone else had typed for him. "If the boss can fire me," I said, "I can quit. Goodbye." I hung up first. The override sequence could finish without me. I stepped aside, gave the 2 techs the final instructions they needed, and walked out before the machine could give me another reason to stay. The night air hit my chest like a warning I had ignored for too long. At home, I lay in the dark, eyes open, muscles still braced for alarms that would no longer be my responsibility. Sleep refused to come. Every instinct told me the system would not last until morning. Not with the wrong offsets and the wrong people pretending they understood timing they had never touched. By dawn, the first cracks would already be spreading, and the grid would feel the absence they believed did not matter. I woke before the sun, still wearing the clothes I had not bothered to change out of. The silence pressed hard, the kind that creeps in only when the job that once owned every hour of your life suddenly has no claim on you. I sat at the edge of the bed, rubbing the crease in my sleeve, and for the first time in a long while, I let myself remember how all of this began. I started in a worn-down plant outside Provo, Utah, sweeping metal shavings off the floor. One morning, the line chief, a woman named Nora Kelly, pointed at the curing oven and said, "If you want to understand this place, learn its moods." I laughed back then, thinking she was joking. She was not. Years later, I was the one catching the smallest shifts. Hadley. "This supplier changed the resin formula again," a tech would whisper. "I know," I would answer. "Bump the timing by 3 seconds or Cheyenne will get a batch that warps." Or a loader would call, panicked. "Boise says the packets are off." "They are not off," I would tell him. "Flagstaff's humidity jumped. Adjust the readings. Trust the humans before the sensors." That was the rhythm of my life, 1,000 tiny corrections no dashboard ever learned. Leadership loved to boast that the grid ran without friction. They never mentioned the nights I stood between two failing processes, listening for the tone of a machine the way some people listen for the pitch of a violin. There was a spring storm once, years ago. The curing line in Cheyenne started collapsing under a temperature spike no one predicted. A junior engineer looked at me, terrified. "Do we shut it down?" "No," I said. "Shift the sequence. Do it now." We saved every unit that night. No one asked how. Remembering that now stung more than I expected. All those years, all those instincts, all those choices made on the fly. They believed the system thrived because of their dashboards. It thrived because I carried its patterns inside me, long before anyone cared to ask what it cost. The shift started quietly, the way most dangerous things do. 3 months before the midnight call, I walked into a morning briefing and saw a group of consultants arranged around the table like they owned the place. One of them smiled at me as if I were interrupting. Benton Hargreaves stood at the front, tapping his tablet. "We are moving into an efficiency-centered quarter," he announced. "Automation-first workflows, predictive modeling, less human interference." I leaned back in my chair. Interference. That what we are calling oversight now. He did not look at me. "The models will reduce variability." Nora Kelly, now a supervisor, whispered under her breath. "He still owes you an apology for that coffee." "He does not apologize," I murmured. 2 weeks later, during a cross-state sync call, I heard one of the consultants say, "We removed several manual offsets to streamline the system." I cut in. "Those offsets exist for seasonal variance. You remove them. Cheyenne loses an entire morning." A man named Corwin from the consultant team replied in a smooth voice, "The model self-corrects. It cannot correct for humidity swings. It self-corrects," he repeated, as if saying it twice made it true. After the meeting, I ran into Benton in the parking lot. He brushed past like I was blocking his personal runway. "Benton," I said, "you need to look at the timing sheets before you sign off. They are overriding adjustments that took years to refine." He unlocked his car without turning. "We hired experts. Let them do their job. You hired people who have never stood on a floor at 2 a.m. He paused then, just long enough to let the disrespect sink in. "Hadley, please do not make this difficult. The company is evolving." Nora cornered me later that day. "You all right?" "Fine," I said, though my hands were shaking. "They are preparing the system to run without me." She sighed. "They would be insane. Insane or blind." I answered. The signs were there. Every shortcut, every dismissal, every override. Not one of them wanted to hear what keeping a 6-state grid alive actually required. Silence, to them, meant agreement. They never understood what it was costing. I lay on the couch after the midnight call, staring at the ceiling like the patterns could steady my breathing. The house was quiet. but my mind kept running the grid the way I always did when something felt wrong. Salt Lake Robotics always moved first. Cheyenne Composites depended on its timing. Pueblo's precision metals relied on Cheyenne's curing windows. Flagstaff lined up its renewable assembly behind Pueblo. Boise's AI line only worked when all of them fed clean, synchronized data. I whispered the chain under my breath, the same way some people recite prayers. Salt Lake loses 3 seconds. Cheyenne warps by sunrise. Pueblo overheats before lunch. Flagstaff chokes on missing metals. Boise shuts down by midday. Nora had once told me, "It is like watching dominoes fall in slow motion, except you see it before anyone else does." She was right. The new protocols could predict loads, but they could not interpret the quirks we learned the hard way. They could not smell resin that had been stored too long. They could not read the tension in a crew chief's voice. They could not sense the moment a machine hummed half a tone too sharp. Benton never understood any of that. During one of his early interviews, I asked him, "What is Pueblo's temperature limit for day shift?" He blinked. "The system regulates it." That is not what I asked. He smiled the way people smile when they want you to feel small. "Hadley, this is not a trivia contest." Later, in the parking lot, he walked so close his shoulder brushed mine without an acknowledgement. A simple "excuse me" would have gone a long way. But Benton never wasted words on people he did not value. By the time I finally closed my eyes, the first failure was already forming in my head a robotics run at Salt Lake, stamped with generic parameters, feeding bad timing into a grid that no longer had anyone left to correct it. I was still awake at 3:40 in the morning when my phone buzzed on the counter. I did not move toward it, but the screen lit the room enough for me to read the name Liam Duarte, one of the night leads in Cheyenne. His message came fast. "Hadley, did you change the timing offsets last night? The line is drifting." I pressed my thumb against the table to keep from answering. I had no authority now. Anything I said would only make things worse for the people still inside. I locked the screen without replying. At 5:10, another alert appeared. This one from Boise. Packets do not match the forecast tables. Did Salt Lake push a different run? I turned the phone face down. My chest tightened the way it always did when something was slipping out of alignment, but this time I was not allowed to fix it. By 6:15, Pueblo sent a group message. Temperature rise in the metals bay, not matching the model. "Anyone know what is going on?" I whispered into the empty kitchen. "It is the offsets. They are stacking." But no one could hear me, and even if they did, they would not be allowed to act on it. Another message came in from Liam. "Salt Lake sent a batch early. Cheyenne molds are off. We are losing the first run." I poured water into a glass just to keep my hands busy. "I told them this would happen," I said under my breath, though there was no one around to argue with me. Every new alert felt like another domino falling, exactly in the order I had mapped out the night before. The system was doing what Benton wanted following protocol, trusting the model, stripping out every manual adjustment I had built over 11 years. The irony was bitter. It was working perfectly, and because of that, it was beginning to collapse. By 8 in the morning, Liam finally stopped trying to be calm. He called instead of texting. "Hadley, the composite panels are warping," he said. "They look fine at first pass, but the microchecks are a mess." Did Salt Lake change the robotic sequence? I closed my eyes. They did not change it the way you think. They let the model drive it. So this is from last night. His voice cracked. "Cheyenne is losing an entire run." "Log everything," I said softly. "Every deviation, every timing note. Do not let anyone tell you this came from nowhere." By 9, Pueblo joined the chorus. A metals supervisor named Raymond, someone I barely knew, came through with a rough edge in his tone. "Who pushed us into this heat window?" he snapped. "The ovens are fighting to stay stable. This schedule is suicide. You are on the automation slot now." I answered. "The system rescheduled you." So the system does not know we cannot run full capacity after mid-morning. He cursed under his breath. We are scrapping half a shift already. Just after 10. Flagstaff called. A project lead, Avery, sounded like she was trying not to shout. We cannot complete assembly, she said. Pueblo's metals are late and half the components do not meet spec. Boise is yelling at us to keep feeding the line. What are we supposed to send? Ghost's Flagstaff cannot build on air. I replied, tell them you are holding until you get clean parts. A little after 11. The Boise engineer who had texted at dawn tried again. Our AI line just halted. He said, inputs from 3 states do not match any acceptable profile. The dashboard says data integrity failure. Everything is red. I did not say, I told you so. I just listened to his breathing, the sound of someone watching their world tilt. At 11:45, my news app pinged. Regional manufacturer faces cascading shutdown. The headline read, by early afternoon. Another outlet upgraded the language. Domino-style collapse across the Mountain West. The banner said, and my phone lit up again with a call from Denver. The first call came from Benton at 1:18 in the afternoon. His name flashed across my screen with the same arrogance he always carried into a room. I let it ring until it died on its own. A minute later, another call. This one from Marcy Eller, the regional director. Hadley, please pick up. Her voicemail began, voice shaking. We need to understand the timing sequence. We cannot locate the source of the mismatch. Every facility is escalating. I deleted the message without listening to the rest. 5 minutes passed before the texts began. Liam, Avery, 2 texts from Salt Lake, a supervisor from Pueblo. Then the message that made my throat tighten for an entirely different reason. Hadley, please, we need your insight. None of this makes sense without you. I set the phone face down on the kitchen counter. The vibration rattled the wood every few seconds, a reminder of the same expectation that had followed me for 11 years show up. Fix it. Do not complain. By 3:15, Marcy tried again. Hadley, she said, breathless. The board wants hourly updates. We cannot give them anything. The automated reports contradict each other. I heard someone shouting behind her before the line cut out. A string of calls followed. Salt Lake, Flagstaff, Cheyenne, each one frantic, each one arriving too late for anything but damage control. By early evening, the chief executive officer himself sent a voicemail. His tone was stripped of the practiced smoothness he used at every quarterly meeting. Hadley, I know you are seeing the news. We are facing catastrophic alignment failure. We need your expertise. Please call me back as soon as possible. I did not press play a second time. I did not save it. I turned the phone off completely and slid it into a drawer. For the first time since dawn, the house stopped vibrating. The silence that followed was not peace. It was clarity, the kind that arrives only when people who never respected you suddenly remember you existed. By the time evening settled, Iron Vale's meltdown had turned into a spectacle. Every business outlet was running the same headline. Every investor forum was stripped raw with panic. My phone stayed powered off in the drawer, exactly where it belonged. The call that mattered came through my laptop instead. A notification popped up from an unfamiliar Tempe number. Then a calm voice followed. Ms. Roarke. This is Lena Morell from Phoenix Systems. Do you have a moment? I hesitated, then answered, I do. We have been following today's events, she said, careful not to sound predatory. But that is not why I am calling. We have been studying your work for years. I let out a slow breath. Studying my work. Yes, she replied. Your timing adjustments in the spring cycles. Your microvariance offsets for composite molds. Those were not documented anywhere. We reverse engineered the patterns last year. I blinked, stunned into silence. Lena continued, our director calls them the Roarke signatures. We could tell someone with instinct was behind them. Instinct. The one thing Iron Veil had treated like contamination. She paused just long enough for the weight of her words to land. "We would like to offer you a senior systems architect position," she said. "Full autonomy, full trust. A team that wants to learn the things models cannot." I sat straighter. "Are you sure you want someone like me? My former company decided I was obsolete." "They were wrong," Lena said without hesitation. "They chased a shortcut. We value the person who knew how to keep 6 states breathing." The room shifted around me. Not physically, just the sense that my future no longer pointed backward. "When would you need an answer?" I asked. "We can overnight the offer," she replied. "Sign whenever you feel ready." I did not need the night. I opened the document as soon as it arrived, typed my name, and sent it back. For the first time in a long while, the decision felt like mine. My first morning at Phoenix Systems felt nothing like the 11 years I spent at Iron Veil. No tension in the air, no hurried steps from people pretending not to see me. Just a conference room in Tempe filled with engineers who actually looked up when I walked in. Lena Morell waved me to a seat. "Hadley, this is your team," she said. "They know why you are here." A young engineer named Diego leaned forward. "We read your old timing records," he said. "There are patterns none of us could explain. We want to understand them." I nodded slowly. "They are not patterns you find on dashboards. They come from experience, from listening to the system." Another engineer, Priya, added, "Then teach us to listen. We do not want to rely on models alone." It startled me being asked instead of dismissed. "All right," I said. "Then we build this the right way." We spent the day sketching a new coordination model, not the kind Iron Veil worshipped. A hybrid algorithmic forecasts layered under human judgment with room for instinct and on-the-ground corrections. If a machine hummed wrong, the model would not override the person hearing it. It would adapt to them. By mid-afternoon, Diego looked at the board. "This is nothing like what Iron Veil used," he said. "It is what they should have used." I answered. While we worked, Lena stepped back in with her tablet. "Iron Veil just announced an emergency audit." She said, "Shareholders are demanding answers." "The board removed Benton Hargreaves this morning." I let out a small breath. Not satisfaction, just relief that someone finally recognized the truth. Priya glanced at me. "Does this change anything for you?" "No," I said. "I am here now, and we are building something they never understood." The room felt steady, like a grid beginning to align. 1 week after we switched Phoenix Systems onto the new model, Lena called everyone into the small conference room. She pointed at the projection. "Regional Reliability Index," she said. "We just passed every competitor in the Mountain West." Diego let out a low whistle. That fast Priya turned to me. "These curves are your offsets," she said. "You can see the corrections kick in only when the crews intervene." I shook my head. "They are our offsets now. You were the ones who pushed for human override tags." Lena glanced down at her tablet. "There is something else," she said. "Iron Veil announced a formal shutdown of 3 facilities this morning." The room went still. 3, Diego repeated. "They really could not recover." Lena nodded. "The audit report is brutal. They cited systemic coordination negligence. The board called it a leadership failure," Priya asked. "What about Hargreaves removed from his position?" Lena replied. "Internal memo says he will not lead operations anywhere inside that holding group again." All 3 of them looked at me. I exhaled slowly. "That is not justice," I said. "It is just the bill coming due." Diego tilted his head. "Do you feel bad for them at all?" "I feel bad for the crews," I answered. "Not for the people who deleted every warning they were given." Lena studied me for a moment. "If they called you now with an apology, would you take it?" "No," I said. "They had my number when the first cracks showed. I am exactly where I need to be." Later that afternoon, I walked the hallway outside our operations hub. Through the glass, I could see my team debating a new adjustment. hands moving as they argued about how to protect a line nobody would ever see on a headline. Priya stepped out and caught up to me. "Hadley," she said, "do you ever think about going back to what I asked? A place that only noticed me when it was already on fire." She smiled. "Then let us make sure this place never needs that kind of fire drill. I can work with that," I said. I kept walking, past the glass, past the memories of a midnight call in another world, following the sound of people who finally knew what to do with the way I kept things running.